The comments and statements made within the show are the opinions of the commentators and their guests, have not been evaluated by the FDA, and are in no way attempt to diagnose, treat, mitigate, cure, or prevent any disease or illness. The contents of the show are not to be construed as medical advice. If you have a health condition or health concern, please contact a licensed, qualified healthcare practitioner.
Hi everyone, I'm Nan.
And I'm Tom, and this is a Supplement Super Sleuth.
That'll be me, and the Herbal Storyteller.
And that definitely would be me. And together, we're going to take a peek behind the curtain of the natural products industry.
We'll be sharing naturals in the news, dispelling lots of myths, interviewing key players in the industry, and highlighting our favorite herbs and supplements.
So with that, let's pull back that curtain and see what's there.
Morning, Nan. And how are you doing today?
Hey, how are you, Tom?
I'm doing really well, thank you. I'm excited about our show today. This is our second show, believe it or not. And we're starting to get a little bit more comfortable about how we're doing this. We've got a wonderful guest coming on, but we always do a segment called Natural in the News. And I want to let Nancy start off with that. This was her conceptualization. I think it's just an awesome idea.
I love headlines. I'll read headlines and I'll make some comment, right? So I have a couple of headlines, and then Tom has a couple of headlines, and so let's start this. So there's this plant called lupin, and it is everywhere in the West, Midwest, and West. You don't see lupin a lot on the East Coast, but up in Maine you will, or in Vermont and whatnot. So the headline says lupin and arsenic. Now that sounds really controversial at first, but the story goes like this. It's very cool. Research on soil decontamination by it's a group called Exceptional Plant, and this was posted in August, at the end of August in 2021. Researchers discovered that lupin, a plant belonging to the legume family, so it's lentils are a legume and peas are a legume, releases metal chelating compounds into the soil in response to the presence of arsenic. And this observation may lead to novel strategies for remediating polluted soil. And I love that. And of course, Tom and I were talking about this before the show, and he was talking about lupin and where he's seen it.
Which is all over the California coast about springtime.
Yeah, and it's really a beautiful plant. So it's cleaning the soil as we stare at its beauty, off in the fields. It's cleaning the soil, and I love how plants help us, even when we don't know they're helping us. Second headline is UCI-led study finds medicinal plant extract to prevent morphine addiction. This was posted on October 12th, 2021. A study recently published in the Journal of Pharmaceuticals has focused in on the extract of corydalis, which is also known as Yan Huso, which is used in traditional Chinese herbalism. I've used it often, and it works. It has a way of dealing with minor pain. So there's a whole pattern that we look for when we use it in traditional Chinese herbalism. But needless to say, it has the ability. It's very intense extracts have the ability to possibly support people who are on morphine, so it helps your body not get addicted to it. So this is centuries long. Corydalis has been used for centuries in Chinese medicine, and believe it or not, in the studies it inhibited what's called morphine tolerance and dependence in mice. So a lot more studies need to be done, but fascinating because oftentimes with opiates, they're so addictive, but in some cases with exceptional amounts of pain, they are needed. So helping to lower that threshold of tolerance will keep that need for higher and higher doses for pain. So pretty great.
Yeah, it actually allows them to use less morphine and become less addictive.
Exactly.
You know, and that was a fairly recent study, right, Nan? That came out in October.
In October.
Excuse me, of this year. And you know, I have a couple that I you know kind of follow, being the guy that's with Host Defense Mushrooms and really loving all of the things that I'm learning about mushrooms. And one of the things that they've found is that by eating mushrooms, just consuming mushrooms, it can lower the risk of depression. And that was another it was October the 12th of this year study. And what they had is they looked at 24,000 subjects over the course of 11 years. So this was a really long-term study. And what they found is that consuming mushrooms on a regular basis actually did lower the risk of depression. And that was, credited to the fact that the mushrooms have a really great source of cytoprotective antioxidants. So, and some mushrooms are known for their effect on cognition and mental function and nervous function, and other mushrooms are not so known. And yet, what it seems is that by consuming any types of mushrooms, gourmet mushrooms, food mushrooms on a regular basis, there's quite a bit of evidence now that they can support the ability to keep you from going into depression, which I thought was really an amazing little tidbit out there. And
yeah, I love that too, Tom, because a lot of people some people like the taste of mushroom, but they're nervous. Oh, is it going to give me candida, or is it going to give me a fungal infection? And that's not how it works.
Not at all.
Edible mushrooms have lots of classes of antioxidants, which can just help support your body. They can be good nutrition, but of course, make sure you're eating edible mushrooms.
Well, not only that, but make sure you cook them. Eating mushrooms that are not cooked, raw mushrooms, you don't get very much because you're not able to break down the chitin or the protein structure of the mushroom in order to release the other beneficial compounds that are sort of bound up like in a weaving, if you will, with that protein structure, that chitin. So it is important to cook your mushrooms.
Cook your mushrooms.
Cutting them up in a salad, raw mushrooms in a salad, doesn't give you anything other than a bunch of fiber, particularly.
It's good fiber.
Yeah, it's good fiber, but you're not.
We'll take the fiber.
You're not getting the other compounds that you really want.
Exactly.
And then the other one, which is going to make a nice segue to our guest today, who is an expert on CBD and all things CBD and hemp, is a safety study. And they, a lot of times with plant matter, with plant materials, especially pharmacologists are concerned, like, okay, is this going to have liver damaging effect? And initially there was some, thought that, okay, CBD consumption would damage, potentially have liver toxicity. And what they found is that there's a clinical study that involved a fairly large study. I mean, when you have 839 different subjects consuming oral CBD products for at least 60 days, you're going to get some indication of whether or not it's going to have an effect on liver functionality or liver health. And what they found was no clinical evidence in liver disease in any of the participants.
And what's really interesting about this study, I was actually involved in part of setting up support for people to be part of the study, is that the people didn't have to change anything. All they had to do was take the CBD as part of their life. So whatever foods they were eating, however they were living their life, they could just engage in the study and be part of the study. So it wasn't, in fact, having it in a non-controlled situation gives us a really good indicator. If somebody were to just take it off the shelf, that there would be really significant safety there. So I like the way that it was set up. I love the way that the study was put together, set up, rolled out into the industry, and it gave us an enormous amount of data. So great study.
And what we're going to find out from our guest is that there are so many things about CBD that are coming out that are very, very positive. And I know, Nan, you were deeply involved in hemp and CBD as one of your previous jobs, if you will, and you've given me so many wonderful little factoids about CBD. So why don't you talk to us about the fact that I know there's a lot of chemicals involved in CBD.
Oh, CBD's CBD is one class of cannabidiols, is one class of compounds in the plant cannabis. And cannabis, according to Dr. Duke's phytochemical database, it's a USDA, United States Department of Food, USDA. They have posted so far 253 known chemicals that are part of Cannabis sativa, the plant. And in those, the database cites 114 active chemicals, which means that however they show up in the plant, they're extremely active in humans, in animals. So pretty spectacular plant, very, we in the world of herbalism, and Tom can attest to this, it's classified as what we call an alterative because it can alter the state. You go from one state to another state. Some herbs are tonics and they are, they just help support whatever state you're already in, and other herbs help alter your state. And so, as we all know, cannabis sativa can alter your state. For some, really, really well, and happily so. But there are other active chemicals, and we're gonna, you're gonna hear from, I think, one of our industries, one of the experts on CBD from the natural products industry. We're really excited about having our guest today.
Yep, and I think that that's a perfect segue into introducing our guest, who's Carl Germano. He's a licensed certified nutritionist with a master's degree in nutrition. He works out of New York. He's been involved in our industry for over 30 years, helping people to develop new products, helping people to, companies to find out what's the latest and the greatest and how that might be useful in their product line. And he's deeply involved in research, especially he's written a wonderful book. In fact, I know you can see all of the books on the shelves behind Nancy. One of the things that's always impressed me about Nancy is that that they're not just shelf education; they're actually self-education. She uses them to learn a lot, and she's got Carl's book right there on the shelf. She and I both, when Carl first published this book, which is his most recent book, he's done 9 books now. This was a book that we both grabbed because we knew we were going to get some great information out of it. And then it's called On the Road to Ananda, and there's one particular chemical or compound in CBD called anandamide that it's talking about. Guess what, Nan? We are now in the presence of a man that I respect a great deal. Really happy to have Carl on our show today. As I said, Carl is a licensed clinical nutritionist in New York State, and he has been instrumental in helping a lot of major companies in our industry develop new products. So really excited to have him talk with us today.
Hi, Carl. It's so great to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Nancy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, this is Carl is really honoring us because this is our second show, and he's taking his chances that we're going to get it right.
I trust you, Tom. I trust you implicitly. So,
all right, this is wonderful. So, one of the things that Carl has really been deeply involved in, and Nancy showed you the book earlier, is the studies of CBD and so on. And we're going to have him talk a little bit about that. But then he's into something that for me is just absolutely fascinating, and that's looking at a specific compound out of a plant that has hundreds and hundreds of years of history in the Middle East. As far as being a curative for so many different things. In fact, it's called black seed oil. And it's one of those things where they say it'll cure anything except death. And then they qualify that by saying, and that's probably because you didn't start taking it soon enough. So, Carl, with that introduction, let's what do you have to say about CBD?
Well, there's a lot to say about CBD, but most importantly, to truly appreciate CBD, which is one of numerous active compounds found in hemp called phytocannabinoids, one must really appreciate why we even take these, and this particular phytocannabinoid, and I hate to single this one out. I love the family, and I'll talk about that in a second. But there is no doubt that probably in my 40 plus years experience in product development and nutritional science, phytocannabinoids happen to be the most clinically relevant compounds that ever come to our trade. And the reason why I say this is because they help feed and nourish one of the most important physiological systems in the body called the endocannabinoid system. And people are not familiar with this, and it's been kind of kept under the rug, so to speak, because of the way we've treated or mistreated the plant. Hemp is not marijuana. They're two different plants. Yes, they're the same genus and species, Cannabis sativa, but hemp phytocannabinoids, where CBD is extracted from, hemp has been kind of mistreated for the past 100 years. I mean, it was literally taken off the market. We couldn't cultivate it, commercialize it, consume it. We couldn't even research it because of cannabinoids and the fear about cannabinoids in general. But what we have learned and what has been evolving and what continues to evolve, the critical importance of supporting the endocannabinoid system. Why? Well, first of all, it's a system that has all these receptors all over the body on every single organ system. And the first question, what are they doing there? Well, they are there to help modulate functionality of all physiological systems in the human body. And then you say, well, with all these receptors, there must be something that is touching them, that is attaching to them, that is regulating their activity. And the answers came in the late 1990s with the godfather of cannabinoid medicine, Dr. Raphael Mechoulam out of Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And we've got to learn that we actually produce cannabinoids that touch and influence these receptors. So I tell the whole world, you're just going to have to get over it. Your body, your body eats off these cannabinoids, and you cannot survive without them, and you cannot be healthy without them, because the overall general picture of what this endocannabinoid system does, it helps to maintain homeostasis, health, well-being, balance. And that's the overriding picture. When we get down to the organ level, it has profound effects on the neurological system, the cardiovascular system, and on and on and on, because it's modulating all physiological activity. So when we look at the clinical applications of cannabinoids such as CBD, pain, inflammation, stress, anxiety, insomnia, digestive health, bone health, I mean, the list continues to go on and on and on. So it is that appreciation of supporting this critically important physiological system that's been buried because of the stigma attached to cannabinoids, why we take CBD. Now let's get to CBD. And all of us that have been in botanical medicine for decades truly understand the synergism in plants, and that we cannot rely on any single one compound being the overriding compound that gives that plant its clinical efficacy. No different here. And the data...
Not one ring to control them all, right?
Yeah.
One ring.
Just not going to happen. Just as much we have many ginsenosides and ginseng and echinacea and echinacea. The list just goes on and on and on. Phytocannabinoids as a class of compounds, of which CBD is very important and one of the 100 plus cannabinoids in the plant. We just can't single it out and think this is why the plant is important. When we actually look at the data, we see that those studies that show whole plant extract that contains a nice family of all the phytocannabinoids up against CBD isolate, the whole plant in terms of clinical efficacy and outcome is superior. And no mystery behind that and no surprise. So what I encourage the trade, what I encourage consumers is please stop thinking CBD. Let's talk about hemp whole plant extract. You'll get the CBD in there because CBD is the most dominant cannabinoid in hemp. So when you extract it, you're going to get very high levels, but but you need the rest of the family there. And that's
I'm really, really glad you brought that up, Carl. And just to back up for a second to the stigma for just a second, because historically in the United States, some of the states actually had laws demanding that large landowners grow hemp. It was so important. And at some point, we did a complete 180 in our history. So it's been a very important plant historically for Americans, but for the world. So I love that you brought that up. I think that's really important for a lot of lay people.
I mean,
It
thousands.
goes all the way back to that war on drugs.
Yeah.
And the idea that, okay, it's a hemp plant, so it's the same thing.
Right. Yeah. It's been a lot of confusion that the government has imparted on consumers and Americans in general. But while we've been in the dark ages for decades, Europe hasn't. And they've been cultivating and commercializing and registering. And there's the EU Commission has a full bank of certified, registered, true industrial hemp strains. And I encourage people to, when they buy products, to learn about the company that they're buying from, to learn about the strains that are being used. Because, again, while Europe has been light years ahead of us, and again, this is not the U.S. versus the world. It is what it is. And we have to understand that parts of the world were far ahead of us and didn't have that stigma and were working diligently to register it.
To discover it, yeah.
And so, we look to those strains because those strains have been studied for their genetics, for their THC stability, et cetera, et cetera. And so you can be rest assured that if you're getting a product that's coming from one of these registered strains, it is from true industrial hemp and not a marijuana hybrid, which is what dominates most of the trade here in the United States. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying from a legal standpoint, the governments are going to be very interested in the fact that, hey, we have these new strains that have never been consumed by humans in the past, as opposed to EU registered strains that have been consumed by humans for decades. Safe. And when it comes to safety, this is what the FDA has been screaming at the industry. Look, they've been negligent about regulating, and we're going to get there. But the point is, they've been saying, prove your material is safe. And so any legitimate, responsible, and professional company should be conducting all the necessary toxicology tests that the FDA, they put out a Red Book guideline of how to do these toxicology tests and what you should do, and apply for self-affirmed grasp before we go to new dietary ingredient status. So all we're asking is for these companies who want to play in the game, who want to come into our trade, which they have, do the right thing and conduct these trials the right way, not in a petri dish. There's a handbook of how to do these. They are costly. We have conducted them over the past couple of years and a couple of $1 million, but it's necessary. It's necessary not only for GRAS status here in the United States, but also in Europe, in order to get novel food status, which in Europe, that's how they're going to be regulating CBD and hemp products. And those toxicology tests are equally as important to get novel food status as well, of which we've applied for as well. So we're asking the industry to kind of wake up.
Slow your rush to market down.
Yeah. Stop focusing on CBD. Let's talk about the plant. Let's prove safety for the trade. Let's do the right thing so we can move ahead. And then FDA is going to be forced to kind of regulate the way it should have 6-7 years ago when this all started. They've sat on the sidelines. They've created this monster. And now even Congress, and there are certain laws there that are trying to be passed to help push FDA to help regulate. Because it's come to a kind of a standstill. We have a lot of companies who want to get into this space, but they are waiting for regulation. And so hopefully by next year, this will all be settled and we can kind of move on, because your endocannabinoid system is not going anywhere, right?
Exactly.
And
You've been born with it.
and those who are
Genetically speaking, no, it's not going anywhere.
correct, and
Right.
when you understand its importance,
Yes.
you'll understand and appreciate that whole family of phytocannabinoids in hemp and how useful they can be in so many clinical applications. Again, as I've mentioned before, they've been second to none in terms of their clinical efficacy. And we need to kind of nurture and support that aspect as we go into the next decade.
Yeah, sort of,
Yes.
as
And
we
Tom-
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I was going to just say that one of the things you and I love to focus on are adaptogens and, things that are tonic or supportive in their nature versus, something that would, be kind of therapeutic or clinically, therapeutic. Although it does have therapeutics, one of the beauties of the whole plant of hemp is that it is adaptogenic. It helps your body adapt, right? It's like that. It's beautiful.
There is no doubt, and one of the most important papers that have been published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, the American Journal of Medicine, back in 2007, the endocannabinoid system, mechanisms behind metabolic homeostasis and imbalance. So this has been written about back in 2007 of how the endocannabinoid system is responsible for maintaining homeostasis and balance in the body. And again, that's the overriding picture of what this system is all about. But as we get deeper into the organ system level, we get to appreciate how modulating activity, neurotransmission in the brain, insulin sensitivity, bone building. I mean, the list just continues.
Cytokine production, all of that.
When it comes to cytokine production, while we appreciate curcumin, thymoquinone from black seed, which we could talk about later, boswellia, omega-3s, they're all very important in terms of regulating and applying it to inflammation and pain. But when you look at the pathways to inflammation and pain, without a doubt, the endocannabinoid system is responsible for regulating those pathways, including the eicosanoid pathways, which omega-3s regulate as well. So you can't, if you truly want to help a consumer or a patient for that matter, and you want to look at regulating or addressing pain and inflammation, you've got to use hemp phytocannabinoids along with the other players, and they work very well synergistically because, as I have practiced all my life, any particular disease or condition, there's no one pathway, and therefore there's no one single nutrient, there's not even one single drug that can affect all those pathways. And so collectively, I look at even the protocols to use for treating conditions. Yes, hemp phytocannabinoids, endocannabinoid system is at the top of the list for me, but I like the other synergistic players that have other effects in the body that will make this effect even that more important. So, and more effective. So I look at hemp phytocannabinoids as an adjunct to many of the compounds we have in our trade today. Same thing with bone building. While you think calcium, magnesium, menaquinone 7, vitamin D are all important, which they are, and they are for the hardness of bone, we look at the endocannabinoid system doing something very differently, and that is influencing the cells that build up bone, the osteoblasts, and the cells that break down bone, the osteoclasts, where the endocannabinoid system, when it's fed properly and nourished properly, can suppress the bone breaking osteoclasts and build and enhance the bone making osteoblasts. So there are many different things that this endocannabinoid system does, and people need to appreciate that in order to really appreciate why am I taking CBD, and hopefully that's going to go. Why am I taking whole plant?
Exactly.
Hemp extract.
I'm not just taking that
Hemp
single compound CBD. I'm actually taking the whole plant.
Whole plant.
Makes no sense. Makes
And there was also a compound that you were really kind of turning, Tom, onto which, we had discussions about prior to this podcast, thymoquinone in black seed. So not to just switch gears here, but I would love for our listeners to hear about black seed oil as well from you, Carl, because you're, again, expert in the field. You have so much that you can download to our listeners. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. This is another compound that we extract using CO2 extraction, and Nigella sativa is the genus and species of black cumin seed. And it's an annual herb that has a lot of pharmacological properties. And the use of black seeds, black cumin seeds, in traditional remedies goes back to over 2,000 years. And the herb is described by Hippocrates, and even
Avicenna and Hippocrates.
Yeah, so black seeds in their oil have a long history of folklore usage in both Indian and Arabian civilizations as food and medicine, commonly used for treating a variety of different health conditions, pertaining especially to the respiratory system, digestive tract, kidney, liver function, cardiovascular system, and immune system.
Yeah.
And it's not that it's a panacea, but its activity in the body lends itself very well to these areas. We know also, like the phytocannabinoids, it's also used for general well-being. There are active compounds in black cumin seeds. One of the most important and one of the most dominant is thymoquinone, but there are alkaloids in there. There's flavonoids, saponins, proteins, fatty acids. There's many different compounds in there. But we know that thymoquinone, and when you look at the medical literature, there are hundreds of studies produced. And there's a great paper that was published a couple of years ago on the clinical review trials, especially in inflammatory conditions. And, I look at right now with the pandemic, we talk about cytokine storm from COVID. Cytokines are these inflammatory compounds that are really destroying the lung tissue. What do we have in our arsenal? And we've talked about a couple of the anti-inflammatories, but without a doubt, thymoquinone has major activity in the upper respiratory tract to lower the inflammation and help with the repair process. So there's a long history of use of thymoquinone and black cumin seed oil in a variety of different diseases, and that's kind of on track to be very popular in our trade. And I would say, together with phytocannabinoids, because of its applications in respiratory, digestion, kidney, liver, cardiovascular, and immune, I see the same thing with endocannabinoids, that it makes for a nice combination product. And so black cumin seed oil, you can cold press it, but you get very little of the thymoquinone. When you do CO2 extraction, which is very efficient, you can get up there 20-30% or even more thymoquinone.
Carl, some of our people don't know what CO2 extraction is. Can you quickly do a CO2 kind of tutorial?
Yeah. So when you take a plant and you want to extract or concentrate some of its active compounds, you've got a variety of different ways to do that. Some people use alcohol, which is very effective, but alcohol residues, people don't like that. That's one thing. You've got solvents like hexane and which in the marijuana trade they use quite a bit, which is really bad because those solvents are carcinogenic, like hexane and butane and things of that nature. And then you have clean, very efficient CO2 extraction. What is this? You put the biomass material of this plant in a chamber and you expose it to CO2, carbon dioxide gas, and under high pressure. And what that does is breaks the cells of those plants so that it can release those active compounds. And that's a very simplistic way, but it is the way it's done. And it's very, very efficient. It provides for the most concentrated materials in the plant. And there are no residual solvents that you have to worry about. It's a gas that then expires, and there's no residues at all. So it's very clean, it's very efficient, and it's the preferred choice when you want to do standardization of herbs, which when you look at herbalists, and I've been there for decades, you've got the traditional herbalist who says, you know what, take in the whole plant, and it says the synergy and all that. Then you've got the new age herbalist that says, well, there is an active compound in there, and we should concentrate as much as we can and provide as much as we can. And then there's somewhere in the middle where you can concentrate to a certain degree so you can assure the consumer that you're getting a known level of active in each capsule, while preserving the rest of the plant. And when we CO2 extract hemp, for that matter, again, we get CBD up to a certain level, but you see the full family in the chromatogram. Same thing what we're doing with the black cumin seed oil. We are concentrating thymoquinone, but you see the beautiful peaks and the full bouquet of all the other important compounds as found in the plant. So you can control CO2 extraction. We're not going to isolate thymoquinone. We're going to just raise it up to a certain level, get the rest of the family there, and that's the best way. So it's the best of both worlds.
Yeah. So you're not cherry picking that one compound. You're actually bringing in all the other compounds. You're just assuring people that yes, you're going to get this very important compound in the right amount.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great. That's very helpful.
Yeah, and you know what, Carl, what's fascinating is that, like you mentioned with hemp and CBD, in Europe, they're not in the dark ages like we are. They've been studying this stuff for a long time. The same thing with black seed oil. It's relatively new on the market here, 5-10 years at max, on the market here in the United States. So it's kind of like a brand new compound. We just have no idea what it is. People hear about it, and then they think, okay, well, I'm just going to take it, but they don't know why they're taking it or what it's going to do for them. And so I think information like this is great. It really does.
It's important, absolutely. And this type of extraction may be a little bit, have a little bit of a price difference from other lesser extracted types of oil, special oils. I mean, it'll be close, but one of the things Tom and I are trying to do, Carl, is educate the lay people, both of my practice and people that we know, about what we are doing that's excellent in the industry. And one of the things that we are doing is making sure that companies who are dedicated to excellent extraction and dedicated to third party quality control, et cetera, and meeting these requirements, that people get to know them. I think what happens, especially, with herbs of commerce, people start saying, well, I found this one and it's really cheap, or so-and-so on a TV show or on the internet says that they have a CBD and I like that person. So we're trying to help really disseminate the knowledge and the expertise that you have, Carl, and others in the industry who are what I would say the elite of the natural products industry, that want to offer the very finest, and also have safety parameters and really understand what's in the product before they put it on the market. And that might look really different to a lot of lay people. They may not have the discrimination. So that's why we're doing this podcast. And that's why what you're sharing is so crucial, because this is what makes extracts different, and it makes them safer, and it makes them work more efficiently and effectively.
And it's an admirable thing that you're doing, Nancy, Tom, and keep up the great work. And education is everything, because we can't rely on the standard medical establishment to educate us, especially in these areas. But you mentioned something very important, and that is, people, they look at products and, immediately they go to what's the cheapest. Well, you get what you pay for, so to speak.
Exactly.
And in this case, as I said, get to know your company, get to know the materials that you are ingesting, and whether those materials went through proper toxicology or go through proper testing and what have you. This is critically important, and it's not just about saving a couple of pennies, because it's your body. And, you know, I would spend more money on my body than on anything else. And it doesn't boil down to what's the cheapest product out there, because very often when you find out and you do your due diligence about what's in that product, you're going to be surprised that it doesn't uphold to the standards that one should uphold to.
And that's generally one of the problems with our industry, Carl, is the fact that people try something and they go for the cheapest rather than do their diligence first. And so it's kind of like the computer adage, you know, garbage in, garbage out. They try something and it doesn't work, and then they say, oh, that industry doesn't know what they're doing, it doesn't work, I'm not going to do that anymore.
Right.
And they've thrown the baby out with the bathwater.
Right. And again, when it comes to hemp and CBD, the cheaper materials are the CBD isolates, which are drugs because they're isolated compounds that compete with GW pharmaceuticals, and B, from a clinical standpoint, as I mentioned before, the data is pretty clear that CBD isolated by itself is not as clinically relevant and efficacious as the whole plant. So, you know, you buy cheap, you get...
Yeah, and keep in mind that when you buy cheap, it's because the manufacturer of that product bought even cheaper.
Yes.
And can sell it to you for cheap. So you really you're not getting any good quality.
And CBD isolate is very cheap, and people are taking risks using that material just from a legal standpoint, but then from an efficacy standpoint, why the consumer may not be, reacting to it as well as they could be, is because of you got cheap, you got an isolate, and
you're not feeding your whole system.
Yeah. So anyway.
Well, thank you. And is there anything else you want to add about black seed oil and or hemp?
Yeah. Well, look, we could spend hours on either one of these.
Yeah, and they'll have you back, by the way.
But black seeds and their active constituents, domiquinone being the most dominant, has been shown to have multiple uses and effects in treatments with patients that you look in the literature with several diseases: inflammatory, autoimmune, metabolic syndrome. And there are many other advantages. It has antimicrobial, it's got what we call nociceptive pain signaling, anti-epileptic activities, very similar things we see with the cannabinoids as well. And, we found that the side effects of herbal medicine did not appear serious when it comes to applying clinical trials to most of the major effects that have been shown to be beneficial when you use black seed oil. It's pretty innocuous. The properties include hypoglycemia, hypolipidemia, opening up the bronchodilation for the lungs. So it's very important for the lungs, especially with COVID are still around us. It may be something very good to take on a regular basis. And again, there have been a lot of clinical trials done for this product. And look, we need to do more clinical trials on every product that we
on everything. Right.
And more companies should be putting money into research, not only just safety and stuff like that. So anyway, but there's plenty of clinical and animal studies to show the importance of both black cumin seed as well as hemp phytocannabinoids. Yeah.
Carl, this has been absolutely astounding, wonderful, as I expected it would be. With herbs, I've been doing herbs for so many years now, and just been an herbalist and a plant guy for so many years. I have some favorite herbs, and one of my favorite herbs is actually blooming here in California right now, and that is an herb that's native to California. It's the California poppy, and it was used by the indigenous peoples of the state of California for who knows how many hundreds, if not thousands of years that they've been here. And the native tribes of California use California poppy as a calming and a sedative type of a plant and herb as an ally, and it helped with it's got some wonderful pain relieving aspects to it too. So as usual, science is now trying to catch up because they're starting to look at the California poppy and go, hey, all these people use this for so many hundreds of years. Maybe there's something here. And this is something that herbalists and, ethnobotanists and traditional peoples have known for hundreds of years and used for as long as they've known it. California poppy's been studied, and it's been studied for lots of different situations, especially including providing relief for migraines, which actually it works pretty well for migraines. And for muscular pain, it's great, especially, minor like shoulder, neck, tension pain, and also for something that most people don't even stop and think about, but it's called repetitive thinking, where you just can't get that thought out of your mind, and especially when you're trying to go to sleep and you've got some tension in your body and your mind keeps going back over things that maybe happened during the day that you don't want to think about anymore.
I call that hamster on a wheel.
Yeah, hamster on a wheel in the brain. Yes, exactly.
In the brain.
Exactly. So it's a wonderful plant for that, and it's a fascinating plant because like a sunflower, it's tuned into the sun. It's got these 4 amazingly beautiful, bright orange petals. Now, they've hybridized it so you can buy it in different colors now if you want to grow it in your garden. But these beautiful orange petals open up when the sun comes out. And if it goes behind clouds, if it's occluded by the clouds, like on a cloudy day, they don't open. But when the sun comes out, it's open again. So it's just this gorgeous orange color. There's even legends saying that the Spanish, when they came to California and were sailing up and down the coast, would be looking at the coast and seeing nothing but orange on the coast because the poppy was just so everywhere. And I know down in Big Sur, which is close to where I live, during the spring, between the lupine and the poppy, it's just an amazing show of color. So, again, it's a member of the poppy family, Papaveraceae, and that means that, it's a member of a family that has opiates, but this particular member of the family doesn't have any opiates. Right. So there is that doesn't present any kind of a problem or potential for addiction. Now, but one thing that I really love about it is when you have like these physical discomforts where your body is just really kind of not able to get comfortable and you want to try and get a good night's rest. It's a super wonderful herb for that. It'll help allay those aches and pains, and it'll help you kind of drift off into a nice sleep without your body and your mind going crazy all the time, your mind going over and over again. Now, one thing you do think you want to keep in mind is California poppy increases the neurotransmitter serotonin, which is kind of our feel-good, relaxing hormone. But sometimes too much of a good thing can be too much of a good thing.
Too much of a good thing, right?
Yeah. If you're going into surgery, probably a good idea to stop taking it so that it doesn't have an enhancing effect on the anesthesia, because they're going to be giving you, if you're going into surgery, you're going to be getting an anesthetic, and we don't want it to take you too deep, so to speak. And also, it's one of those herbs where you'd have to follow if you took too much, you'd have to follow the directions of don't drive or operate heavy machinery. I don't know how many people out there operate heavy machinery, but that was always the warning that you got. So anyway,
there are a lot of people that do.
I'm
Truckers,
sure.
etc. Yeah.
But I absolutely love this herb, and one of the other things that it's been used for a lot is for children. Those peevy, whiny, kind of, I can't go to sleep, I don't want to go to sleep.
Fussy. We call them fussy.
Yeah, fussy kids.
Fussy children.
You can give them a nice little California poppy tea, and it's just beautiful. Yeah. And you can, what I like is when my kids were little, I'd show them the picture of the flower. I'd show them the flower and say, we're going to give you some sunshine, and they loved it. So that's it for me. That's my favorite herb of this day is California poppy.
One little thing that we always cover, and that is drug interactions. So California poppy does increase serotonin. So if you're on mood-altering drugs that are SSRIs like Prozac, Paxil, or MAO uptake inhibitors, MAOIs, you really should check with your physician and or your psychiatrist before you add California poppy if you're on any of those classes of drugs, okay? So just be careful. It is really safe for people who are not on pharmaceuticals, but there may be, not necessarily are, but there may be drug interactions. So be careful there. And speaking of, compounds that are mood altering in a good way, my my favorite thing this particular show is 5-HTP. 5-HTP is 5-hydroxytryptophan. Now, L-tryptophan is a naturally occurring amino acid, and you find it often in foods. It's often found in foods, and 5-HTP is what's called an intermediary. Okay, so it naturally converts to serotonin. And 5-HTP is derived from the seeds of Griffonia simplicifolia, which is a legume. It's in the legume family. And the seeds are used, and the 5-hydroxytryptophan is extracted using enzymes out of the legume. So use and research of 5-HTP has been ongoing in the United States since the mid-1950s. Hard to believe. It was a long time ago when human clinical trials were started on the use of 5-HTP. And in a PubMed search, some of the earliest human clinical trials on the isolated compound of 5-HTP were done on groups of schizophrenic patients. And those were published somewhere in the year of 1959, 1960. So the underlying hypothesis was if the body isn't producing enough serotonin, then why don't we give it something that's naturally occurring to support and see if the body will produce more serotonin. And 5-HTP, again, is that intermediary that supports the body's processes of producing its own serotonin, which has been found clinically to work. So some sound bites on 5-HTP is that it easily crosses the blood-brain barrier, okay? And so it gets into the central nervous system, especially the brain, and it effectively increases the central nervous system synthesis of serotonin, which is great because that allows us to feel relaxed but focused. And serotonin is a neurotransmitter that's also part of our wake, sleep, wake cycle. Okay, so we're entrained with the sun, but if we don't get enough sunlight and we don't produce enough melatonin at night when the sun goes down, we don't produce enough serotonin during the day. So those two neurotransmitters are kind of, one's the daytime neurotransmitter, one's the nighttime neurotransmitter, and they're very linked together. And they're both related to our exposure to the sun. So 5-HTP can be really helpful and can be paired as the daytime or the opposite supplement to melatonin. And clinical studies have found that 5-HTP increases the body's own production and availability of serotonin. And so that can elevate mood. So some wonderful things that can happen is that you get an increased positive effect. This may happen. Increased positive effect on emotional well-being. You may also have some appetite regulation depending upon sleep. And your melatonin production may also be positively impacted with using daytime 5-HTP. So that helps with that healthy sleep cycle. And that's why I love 5-HTP. Suggested serving is 50 milligrams twice a day. So your body takes it up and uses it really rapidly. So taking a serving once a day may not get it done. You need to take it a couple times during the day in order to have it work throughout the day. So I often suggest to my clients take 50 milligrams in the morning and then 50 milligrams after lunch sometime. And then that will keep your serotonin levels pretty even throughout the day. Start with 50 and work yourself up to 100. And it's not necessary to take more than 200 milligrams per day. We don't recommend it. There are some drug interactions, just like California poppy increases L-tryptophan in the body, so does 5-HTP. And because of that, we have to be very, very careful with the class of drugs that are mood-altering drugs. The selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors called SSRIs. Those are antidepressants such as Prozac and Paxil and Zoloft and Luvox, all of that, the whole entire class you have to be really, really careful with. And then monoamine oxidase inhibitors, those are MAOIs. Those also we have to be careful of because they change the way your body takes up your serotonin into the cells. So very important that if you're on any of those classes of drugs, that you don't take 5-HTP, or you check with your psychiatrist or psychopharmacologist or naturopath or chiropractor or clinical herbalist before you make a decision on whether you want to add 5-HTP to your daily supplement regime.
Wow. Man, that was awesome. Now, folks out there, you're probably wondering, okay, now who are these guys? And who are these people? Why are they, sometimes goofy, sometimes really, kind of getting deep into it? And so I thought I'd explain it a little bit. Nan has had a complementary and alternative health care and herbal clinic for over 32 years, and she's always been focused on difficult to treat conditions, and has also at the same time been a spokesperson and an educator in the natural products industry for over 27 years with some of the most reputable and well-known companies in the industry. So it's not like we're just sort of making this up. This is what we've been living. This is our entire adult life.
True. And Tom's herbal background goes way back to the early 1970s in Hawaii. For any of you who would love to end up there, which I would, he was an organic farmer and worked with local doctors making fresh orange and, organic juices. Orange juices. Wow. Organic, and there were vegetable and fruit juices that he disseminated to the patients of the doctors who were working with people all throughout the Hawaiian Islands. And since then, over the past 30 years, he's worked for two very large and well-known, very reputable companies in the natural products industry as their herbal educator and trainer. Yeah.
Sometimes called the herbal storyteller. How about that?
Yes. I love that name. So now you know who we are. And we'll be doing this podcast twice a month, interviewing key people and thought leaders in the natural products industry. And if you wouldn't mind, please like our Facebook page, share our podcast with interested friends and family, and let us know if there's something you want to hear about. We want to know what you're interested in learning about. We may already have the answers and be able to share it right away, or we might develop an entire episode based on some of the information that you want to share. So please share with us. We'd love to hear from you. And with that, we'll...
Well, no, wait, Nan. You gave such a great clinical explanation. I actually have a clinical question for you.
Yeah, I do. What's that?
Yeah,
Tom?
well, it's kind of odd, but, how come they call hemorrhoids? Shouldn't they really call them asteroids?
Oh my God, Tom. All right, everyone.
And
I'll
with that,
see you in a couple weeks. Bye.
Bye now.
Okay, everyone. Until next time, I'm Nan.
And I'm Tom.
We'll have more great topics and guests in the very near future. So join us right here in 2 weeks as the Supplement Super Sleuth
And the Herbal Storyteller take another deep dive into the fascinating world of the natural products industry.
See you later.